Okay, for number 4, it says look at the two functions, f of x, which is right here below, and g of x to the right, which is this one, the graph. Which function has the lowest minimum? Okay, well, and explain how you know. So let's go ahead and look at this first one, this f of x. So f of x, remember, is y equals, and we have 4 times x plus 5 squared minus 10. Well, can we find the vertex? Because remember, max or min is going to be our vertex. So it's in vertex form, so we can actually know what the vertex is. So the vertex here, well, if it's in the bubble, here it's in the bubble. So we're only looking at this 5, so it's going to be opposite. So it's going to be negative 5. And then outside the bubble is our y, and it stays the same. So negative 5, negative 10. Okay? So if we're looking at height, which is max and min of our vertex, so we're really only looking at our y. So how high or how low. Okay? So let's look at the graph. So at on the graph, we can kind of see where the vertex is, right there. And what is our point right here? Not the point, but where does it hit? Where's the lowest on the y that it hits? It's going to be negative 16, okay? So if the lowest is negative 16 for g of x and negative 10 for f of x, well, the lowest would be negative 16 because that's lower than negative 10. Because f of x, the lowest it goes is right here. Okay, so negative 16 would be the lowest amount, the lowest minimum, thought I was highlighting, would be the lowest minimum, negative 16. Okay, so that would be our answer, would be g of x, would be our function that has the lowest minimum. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Okay, so our next question says, describe the effects the numbers 2, 5, and 12 have on the shape and position of the parent function, f of x equals x squared. And then it gives us f of x equals 2 times x minus 5 squared plus 12. So let's go ahead and review the different parts of the shifting, the transformations. So let's go ahead and write our vertex form that we went over in class. So we have y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Okay, so let's look at this first part. So remember, if we look at if it's positive or negative, that lets us know if it's going to reflect over the x-axis. So if it is positive, it just stays the same. Okay, so no reflection. So no reflection. If it's negative, then it will reflect over the x-axis. Because remember, that's going to be positive is happy, and then negative is going to be our sad. So that's where it reflects. Now let's look at our number. So our A, okay, right here for our A. So here, this is going to be our stretch or compress. Now, if you remember, if A is bigger than 1, so if A is bigger than 1, then that means it's going to vertically stretch. Okay, so that's our vertical stretch. Okay, and then if A is between 0 and 1, so usually it's going to be a fraction, but if A is between 0 and 1, then that's going to be our vertical compression. Okay, so it's either going to be vertically stretch or vertically compress. So if it's bigger than 1, it stretches, and if it's between 0 and 1, then it compresses. Now remember, we don't look at the sign here because we've already used the sign for our reflection. Okay, we're only looking at the number. Okay, so the next part is going to be RH. Okay, so here, this is going to be our left and right because it's in the bubble, so it's with our X. So our X-axis is going to be our left and right. Okay, so if it's positive, now remember it's going to be opposite. So if once we pull it out and we do the opposite, that lets us know that it's going to, like, let's say if it's -5 within there, then it would be +5. Okay, so positive means we're going to go right. If it's negative, then it will go left. But remember, we're looking at the opposite of what it is. Okay? Then last is going to be our K. So our K is our Y. That's our up and down. Okay? So our up and down, we'll put up and down. So since it's our Y and it's not in the bubble, it's by itself, so it stays the same. Okay? So positive, we would go up. Negative, we would go down. Okay? And I'm going to put same because we're not going to change anything. We're not changing the signs or anything like we do with the X. Okay? Excuse me. So let's go ahead and look at what they gave us. So it's asking, what does the 2, 5, and 12 do to our parent function? Well, the 2, since it's in our A position, well, is it bigger than 1 or is it between 0 and 1? Well, it's bigger than 1. So we're going to vertically stretch it. So we it's going to be a vertical stretch by a factor of 2. Okay, because we have to put that 2 in there. We have to put that number, that value in there. So it's vertical stretch by a factor of 2. Now let's look at our 5. Our 5 is in our H position. And notice it says X minus 5. Well, it's in the bubble, so we change it. It's going to be opposite of -5, so it's a +5. So positive means that we're going to go right. So we're going to shift right. And remember, we have to put our value, so we're going to shift right 5. Okay. And now let's look at our 12. Our 12 is in our K position, and it's positive. It stays the same. We don't have to change anything. So positive would go up. Okay. So we're going to shift up. Remember, we have to put our value. So we're going to shift up 12. Okay. All right, so let's look at our next one. The function f of x is shifted to produce the function f of x minus 4. Which direction was the graph shifted? Okay, so if we look back at what we have here, well, the 4 is in our bubble. So if it's in our bubble, which direction are we going to go? Well, if it's -4, we do the opposite because it's in our bubble. So the opposite of -4 would be +4. So positive would go right. So it is shifted right, and we have to put the value, so shifted right 4. Okay. All right, so number 7. Let's look at number 7. Using the chart, what is the average rate of change of f of x over the interval? Okay, so our chart, this is our chart, okay? So our chart, I'll go ahead and draw the line so you can kind of see what we're dealing with. So x, of course, is x. F of x means y equals, right? So if that's our y column and our x column, then we have points that we can use. So if you remember, what is our average rate of change formula? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so we need points to be able to find our average rate of change. Okay, so for this first interval, let's go ahead and list our points. So what are our points? Well, it's asking, or it's really saying, -1, between -1 and 3. So let's find that. So between -1, which is right here, okay, and 3, which is right here. So that gives us x and y points. Let's go ahead and fill that in. So we have -1 for our x and 37 for our y. And we have 3 for our x and -19 for our y. Okay, so we can use this to calculate our average rate of change because we have our x values and our y values. Okay, so we can say -19 minus 37, because remember we're just plugging in our values, but the sign right here is still going to be negative. Okay, and then we plug in. So we have 19 minus 37, and then we have 3 minus -1. Okay. Okay, so -19 minus 37 will give us -56. And then 3 minus a -1, so minus a negative would be positive. So really that's 3 plus 1. So 3 plus 1 is 4. So -56 over 4. And then if we reduce that, or if we simplify that, we could divide both by 4, because we can simplify that. And that would be -14. Okay? So the average rate of change for this first one, the average rate of change is -14. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the second